Calico, California. It's a ghost town with a story like most every other mining boomtown, except for one major difference that made it perhaps one of the best preserved examples of its type in our country. Stick around because we're going to let you in on exactly what that difference was. It's a great story that lies just beyond the exit. Nestled in the heart of the Mojave Desert lies a town frozen in time, whispering tales of a bygone era where silver was king, and fortunes were made and lost pretty much overnight. Welcome to Calico, a gem of California's mining history, and today, our portal to the past. Let's step back in time. It's 1881, and as legend has it, 4 prospectors were looking for their fortunes, striking out from Barstow, California, which was then called Grapevine. With the distant mountain range to the northeast in their sights, they journeyed to the heart of the Mojave Desert. Noting the area's multicolored soil, they referred to it as Calico Mountain, and it didn't take long to find those fortunes either, as they located an enormous silver vein in a matter of a few months. With the help of the San Bernardino County Sheriff, Mr. John C. King, they founded the Silver King Mine, one of the biggest silver strikes in state history. You may be wondering why the mine was named for the sheriff. Well, King held a grub stake in the venture, meaning he had funded nearly all of the project for a piece of it. In this case, I suppose that included the name as well. Calico became a boon town, peaking with over 500 mines and nearly 1,200 people. A post office was established as well as a school. It garnered its own voting district and, at its peak, boasted 3 hotels, 4 general stores, 3 restaurants, and not to mention 2 lawyers, a doctor, a justice of the peace, and the ever-present deputy sheriff. Telegraph and telephone service were here as well. The town even founded a local newspaper, aptly named the Calico Print. You could say times were good in Calico, without much to worry about except maybe the extreme desert heat. This was all about to change as the U.S. government passed a law that would bring the town's economy to a grinding halt. The 500-plus mines were far from tapped out. In fact, they were still striving. No, it was actually the intrusion of a new federal law that was enacted at the same time, the Silver Purchase Act, that altered Calico's course. The U.S. Treasury was attempting to buy up as much silver as it could, which, in the process, drove the price of silver to an all-time low. Calico's mines couldn't break even. By 1899, the post office was closed, and then the school. There simply weren't enough children to justify the expense anymore. By 1915, Calico was virtually abandoned. Many of the local buildings were moved to nearby towns. Outside of a few stalwart homesteaders, the bones of the mining town lay baking in the California sun. In 1916, though, a spark of hope began being seen at Calico, in the form of the Zenda Mining Company, who took a chance on the town, attempting to install a cyanide processing plant to extract what precious silver remained. For a while it worked, and worked well, but eventually the silver did run out. And from this point, Calico could have met the fate of nearly every mining ghost town, spending the next century withering away until it was reclaimed by the harsh desert it was built in. Yes, it could have, but that's not how the story ended. Do you remember the sheriff in our story? Well, it turns out John King was not the only one from his family to live in the vicinity. In fact, he had a nephew that grew up in Southern California on his family's farm, later finding his own fortune, but more importantly, becoming the biggest benefactor of Calico, California. Enter Mr. Walter Knott, who many of you may know for his famous berry farm and amusement park, Knott's Berry Farm. However, at this point, he was merely a man on a mission, bound and determined to make it on his own merit. Mr. Knott and his new bride decided to set up a homestead in the nearby town of Newberry, later called Newberry Springs. He was a farmer, but more importantly, a good carpenter. Needing to bolster their income in those early days, he worked for the Zenda Mining Company, fashioning their mini redwood process tanks for their silver extraction endeavor. It was here that a seed was planted, so to speak, in a couple that would become the most famous farmers in California history. For now, though, Calico faded away again, awaiting its next opportunity. That opportunity would come sooner than most would expect. By the 1940s, Walter Knott wasn't a poor homesteader anymore, but the founder of what could be called a growing financial empire. Knott's Berry Farm, with its chicken restaurant and ghost town themed amusement park, were wildly popular, not to mention successful. And while he loved his little ghost town that he had created to entertain the guests at his farm, his heart lay in a real ghost town that lived on in his memories. So, Walter, his son Richard, and a fellow by the name of Paul Van Cliven, the art director behind the designs of Knott's Berry Farm, decided to take a little Route 66 road trip back out to Calico. They spent the day poring over what was left, trying to piece Walter's memories together with what remained. In the end, whether from heartfelt inspiration or hot desert sun, they came back with a crazy notion. We are going to rebuild an authentic Western ghost town. So, in 1951, the Knotts bought the mining town back from the Zenda Mining Company and started at once to rebuild Calico under Paul Van Cliven's skilled direction. This was no small task, but that didn't deter this team that had already built a ghost town where there wasn't one to start with. Some buildings remained, and the decision was made mostly to leave them just as they were found. Others needed remodeling, and some needed recreation altogether. Calico, for a third time, was reborn and became a wonderful, yet very costly preservation effort to meet Mr. Knott's vision. The cost was between $700,000 and $900,000. If you adjust that for inflation, that's close to $7 to $10 million today. Not only that, but they also provided a caretaker tour guide as well. He took care of the town, lived in it, and greeted all the guests. And the little ghost town lived on. Buildings, stores, restaurants, even a tourist train line were all available, all just a day's drive from Los Angeles. In fact, the site became so popular that overflow parking out on the highway was a regular occurrence. There were also rumors at the time that the state was trying to tax Mr. Knott further because of this little operation. Whether true or not, Walter made a move no one was expecting. He donated the whole thing, that is, to San Bernardino County, who made it a regional park and supplied their own people to man it. This way, the government would stay off his back, and the little town of Calico would live on even past his death in 1981. The park is full service, including a campground, mini cabins, 2 restaurants, and a lot of other fun to be had, all thanks to one thoughtful benefactor that saved this ghost town from a certain doom in the desert.
Well, as we wrap up Calico's story, I have one question for you. If you could pick a ghost town to do just the same way or similar to what Mr. Knott did, would you do it? If so, leave me a comment on what ghost town you would pick. If you are getting value out of these videos, we would love to ask you to subscribe to our channel. You may not know it, but we are so close to reaching the goal of 1,000 subscribers, and you could help us push that just over the line. We would be very grateful. Well, thanks again for being here. We love having you with us. And remember, you never know what you'll find until you go beyond the exit. Thanks, and God bless.